Thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, Israel saying Hamas is violating the Gaza ceasefire agreement by not returning the remains of all of the dead hostages. President Donald Trump says Israel can begin fighting Hamas again if it doesn't fulfill its part of the peace deal. And Israel's defense minister says he told the military to prepare a comprehensive plan to defeat the terrorist group if the war begins again. And what lies ahead? We're going to hear about the difficulties of implementing phase 2 of the president's plan there in Gaza, including getting Hamas to disarm. And a new report says the number of young people here in America identifying as transgender has dropped sharply. We're going to hear why the trans movement among the young people may have simply been a passing fad. All those stories and more right now on CBN NewsWatch.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
It is Thursday, the 16th of October. We're going to begin this half hour with Israel and Hamas, as President Donald Trump says Israel can resume the fighting if the terrorist group fails to uphold its part of the ceasefire deal. As Chris Mitchell now reports from Jerusalem, Hamas still has not returned the bodies of all remaining hostages.
Today, the Knesset lowered its flags to half-mast to mark 2 years on the Hebrew calendar since the Hamas attacks on October 7th. Hamas released 2 more bodies to Israel on Wednesday, but 19 bodies are yet to be returned in accordance with the ceasefire. Hamas says it needs more time and special equipment to find the remaining bodies in the rubble of Gaza. In a post on X, U.S. Ambassador Mike Huckabee said, "As grateful as I am for the 20 living hostages set free by President Trump's deal, I will not forget that Hamas still holds the remains of several hostages they murdered, including Americans Itai Chen and Omer Nutra. Pray that they also come home now." President Trump said the horrific conditions in which the hostages were held makes their bodies difficult to find. Israeli charged that the delay is a breach of the ceasefire. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz says he told the Israel Defense Forces to prepare a comprehensive plan to defeat Hamas if necessary. The terror group has reestablished its rule in the streets through intimidation and public executions. The head of Centcom called on Hamas to suspend violence and shooting at innocent civilians in Gaza. In a statement, he added, "This is an historic opportunity for peace. Hamas should seize it by fully standing down, strictly adhering to President Trump's 20-point peace plan and disarming without delay." President Trump told CNN in a phone interview, "Israel will return to those streets as soon as I say the word." Meanwhile, the families of the released hostages continue to celebrate their joy at being reunited with their loved ones.
How much I dreamed of this moment, to stand here and say thank you, God. Thank you for the great miracle you did for us at the most special moment possible. To have the privilege of seeing my son together with his 19 friends. That is the greatest miracle there is.
Father of released hostage Eitan Moore encouraged Prime Minister Netanyahu to finish the war.
To achieve this goal, a price must be exacted from Hamas until they surrender and return the hostages. Once all the hostages return to us quickly, Hamas must be destroyed, and the enemy should be encouraged to leave the Gaza Strip, gradually returning the Gaza Strip to the people of Israel.
Some of the hostages are showing signs of returning to normal life. Eviatar David played his guitar in a duet. And Bar Kupperstein, in a post on X, gave thanks to the Creator for saving his life.
Going to continue our coverage now with Chris Mitchell. He is joining us from Jerusalem. So, Chris, what is the reaction in Israel to the hostage remains not being returned?
Well, I think they're frustrated, Ephraim, and they feel like Hamas is playing games again with them. When they released 4 of the hostages the other day, one of those was not one of the hostages. It was actually somebody from Gaza. So I think they feel like Hamas is doing what they have done in the past, psychological warfare, trying to upset Israelis, and especially those families that are waiting and longing for their loved ones to return so they can have a proper Jewish burial. So I think that's a lot of people are just realizing Hamas seems to be playing them along again. There is information that I've seen that Hamas or Israeli intelligence understands that they know where 10 of these deceased remains are. And so they're just hoping and that Hamas will go ahead and, if necessary, go ahead and return those remains.
President Trump says Israel can resume fighting if Hamas doesn't fulfill the ceasefire deal. Does not returning the hostages remain count as a breaking point here? And could Israel attack Hamas again?
Well, to your question, I think Israel could attack Hamas again. That remains to be seen. I'm not sure if not returning the remains of these Israelis would be considered breaking the agreement egregious enough so that Israel would go in and attack again. I really think the big sticking point is going to be disarming. If Hamas does not disarm, according to this peace plan, then I think that could be the sort of what will force Israel to go back and to reclaim Gaza and finally defeat Hamas. And I think that's if that's the case, and if President Trump gives the word to Israel, that could be, the end of Hamas as we know it, and perhaps they would finally go ahead and take over all of the Gaza Strip.
Can Israel force Hamas to stop public executions, or would that be a violation of the ceasefire deal?
Well, it could. If Israel goes in to stop those public executions, perhaps they would consider Israel in violation of the ceasefire deal. But I think right now those executions, is something that Hamas has done throughout its history. We have seen over the years sometimes when they find Israelis or they accuse people of collaborating with Israel, that's a death sentence. What we have seen in some of these executions is some clans that have, in the last several months, actually been working with the IDF against Hamas. And so that's what seemingly is happening right now. And just one more example of the brutality of Hamas and how they have ruled the people of Gaza with just such an iron fist. And so when the IDF pulled out of these areas, they just reasserted themselves, took over the streets, and trying to do what they call purification before liberation. Purification means eliminating any enemies that they have before liberation, and that would be coming against Israel and trying to defeat the Jewish state.
Chris, how would the Israeli public react if the war started again?
I think it would have mixed reactions, Ephraim. First of all, Israel's very weary from 2 years of war. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Israelis have interrupted their lives, their businesses, their family lives. Some, spending literally hundreds of days, 400, 500 days, more or less, but still, it's been very difficult for Israelis to prosecute this war. On the other hand, they would feel that maybe this is the way we need to finally defeat Hamas, to go back in and finally finish the job, as that father in our report said. Many people, and they're a smaller, I would say, vocal majority here in Israel that really wanted throughout the war to make sure that the number one goal was to defeat Hamas, and then we could go on. And as we've seen, Benjamin Netanyahu has tried to balance the military pressure on Hamas while trying to get out most of the hostages, which he actually succeeded in doing.
I want to ask you for a bit of a history lesson here. The father of a released hostage said in your story, Gaza should be returned to the people of Israel. So take us back. When did Israel give up Gaza, and would Israel want control of it again?
Well, going back to 2005, that's when there were about 9,000 to 10,000 Jewish people living in Gaza. There were 21 communities. They unilaterally gave them back and withdrew, and that's when the Palestinian Authority took over. 2 years later, Hamas took over from the PA in a brutal coup, and they've been ruling it till then. There are many people that believe there should be a place for the Jewish people to go back to Gaza. If you go back to the book of Genesis, I believe that was given by God to the tribe of Judah, and they hope to go back.
All right, our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell, thank you so much for your insights. Looking forward to hearing from you again in the days ahead for the rest of this week. Coming up, a look ahead to phase 2 of President Trump's peace plan for Gaza and the difficulties of getting Hamas to lay down its weapons and disarm. We're going to hear from the Jerusalem Bureau Chief of the Jewish News Syndicate when we come back. You're watching CBN NewsWatch. The second phase of President Donald Trump's Gaza peace plan may prove much more difficult than phase 1. Phase 2 requires Hamas to disarm, but so far the terror group has given no indication it is willing to give up its weapons. Appearing on this week's episode of The Global Lane, Jewish News Syndicate Jerusalem Bureau Chief Alex Traiman explains how Hamas may be forced to disarm.
First and foremost, they're still firing at Palestinians in the Strip. Those that had been considered to be collaborating with Israel are being shot down in the street. The Centcom commander, Admiral Brad Cooper, stating that Hamas is shooting at innocent Palestinian civilians in the Strip. Now, phase 2 of the plan calls for the creation of an international stabilization force. We don't know what is going to compose that force. The United States said it would commit 200 troops to implementing what you mentioned as phase 2 of the plan, but also stressed that those 200 troops would not be going inside the Gaza Strip. So it's not clear who is going to force Hamas to disarm. The Prime Minister's office here in Israel is stating emphatically that as far as they're concerned, we're still in phase 1 of the deal. All of the bodies of hostages haven't been returned. And at the same time, that if Hamas refuses to disarm, that we will not get to a phase 2 of the deal, and that Hamas is going to be disarmed one way or the other, whether they stand down and disarm themselves or the International Stabilization Force does that. If not, Israel is going to do it.
Well, Israel says it will not withdraw completely until Hamas is disarmed. And I guess the IDF claims it has destroyed 90% of Hamas's military capabilities and their fighters. So what's left to get?
Well, I think that that's correct, that really Hamas has been filed down something like 80 to 90%. In terms of the potential of Hamas to threaten the Israeli home front right now, considering that the IDF is still holding about 50% of the Gaza Strip, and even when they pull back, there's going to be a significant buffer zone in between the areas that are controlled in Gaza by Palestinians and by Israel, which was attacked on October 7th, so that you won't be able to have another October 7th style attack. But at the same time, part of what Israel requires is that Hamas not be the ones governing the Strip. Hamas cannot be in control of the Strip. So as long as you have, let's say there's 10,000 terrorists left with assault rifles, they can still do a lot of damage just by imposing their will and their force in the Gaza Strip, something that is not permitted under phase 2 of the plan.
And it's not just Hamas. There are other radical Islamic militants there with guns. So what are the chances then that an Arab and Turkish security force, maybe Egypt, Turkey, Qatar, others would actually put boots on the ground in Gaza and forcibly disarm Hamas?
Well, that's what we're waiting to see what's going to happen. I mean, we had this President Trump going to this Sharm el-Sheikh conference, for peace in Gaza with the president from Turkey, from Egypt, from other countries, the Qatari prime minister, others, Emir, I think, was there. And we don't really know exactly what they're pledging to do. The president made it clear that they are pledging, those that have it, to put funding towards the rebuilding. But it's not clear yet if any of them are prepared to send troops inside the Gaza Strip. And as long as Hamas is not going to go into a period of quiet, right? And maybe they won't hand forward all of their assault rifles. But if they're going to continue to use their assault rifles in the street and not even permit quiet, if President Trump and his Board of Peace cannot figure out some kind of stabilization force to force Hamas to disarm and for Gaza to be demilitarized, then I think you are likely to see either on the least end of it, that Israel will not relinquish the other 50% of the Gaza Strip that it continues to hold until such a time that Hamas is demilitarized. And on the more aggressive side, that Israel could actually go in and to have regular counterterrorism operations inside the Gaza Strip when they see terror activity manifesting.
And what about future governance? I mean, Hamas wants a role, at least in the transition. They've rejected the idea of even former British Prime Minister Tony Blair and other non-Palestinians having oversight in Gaza. I mean, I don't see a role for the Palestinian Authority either. Do you? What's going to happen there?
Well, Israel has stated that they will not accept any agreement where Hamas has any role in governance of the Strip, and they also will not accept an agreement where the Palestinian Authority has any role in the governance of the Strip, even though the 20-point plan did lay a pathway toward Palestinian Authority governance in the Gaza Strip, only if and provided that the Palestinian Authority will undertake significant reforms, that they themselves are no longer financiers of terror, that they're no longer inciting to terror, that their textbooks, which are the same textbooks that are used in Gaza, are not inciting to terrorism, and are preaching towards coexistence and normalization with the Jewish state of Israel alongside of it. So it doesn't seem like the Palestinian Authority is going to come in the short term. Of what Israel is looking for and hoping is that there are clans, and these are like militias inside the Gaza Strip, that they may not themselves be what any normal person in the West would call like a peaceful organization, but one that at least is committed to working alongside Israel and doesn't pose a direct threat to Israel, that Israel wants to hand over pieces of the Strip to militias, local militias that will work with Israel to maintain calm and police specific areas.
Okay, Alex Traiman, Jerusalem News Syndicate CEO and Jerusalem Bureau Chief. Thank you, Alex, for being with us. We appreciate it.
Gary, thanks for having me.
Also on this evening's episode of The Global Lane, more ICE raids and National Guardsmen, President Donald Trump's plan to reduce crime in some of America's biggest cities, and what biblical prophecies say about peace in Gaza and the Middle East. You can watch the CBN News channel at 8 p.m. Eastern to see The Global Lane. You can also see it on the CBN News app, or you can find it on YouTube. Still ahead, we're going to hear from the author of a new report which says the number of young people calling themselves transgender or gay has dropped dramatically. We're going to explain why when we come back. A new study shows a decline in the number of young people identifying as transgender adults. The lead author tells CBN's medical reporter Lori Johnson he believes many people who identified as trans were simply taking part of a fad, and the fad is now fading.
An analysis of several surveys, including one looking at more than 50,000 Gen Zers from about 250 colleges across America, shows more students see themselves as heterosexual now than in recent years. In his report, The Decline of Trans and Queer Identity Among Young Americans, Professor Eric Kaufman says the number of people in these groups first began rising in 2010 and continued upward until 2023 when it peaked. Since then, it's dropped by about half, from nearly 7% to under 4%. He adds college freshmen are a lot less likely than seniors to identify as trans.
If the youngest cohort represent the future more than the seniors who are graduating, then yes, that would seem to indicate that these trends will continue. Very hard to know what the end point is. I mean, are we going to return to where we were in 2010? We're not near to that yet, but certainly the direction of travel is towards a decline.
Kaufman says while a couple of years ago, college students considered sexual fluidity hip, campuses are now experiencing what he calls a vibe shift.
Much of this just seems to be about tastes and fashions, that these non-conforming gender and sexual identities are less fashionable, less cool, maybe among young people than they were a few years ago. That seems to be the story, and it's independent of politics and of religion and even of mental health.
He points out a number of young trans adults are genuinely confused. Kaufman says this research could signal a reduction in surgeries and hormone injections, scarring young people for life.
One of the hopes here is that the demand for those procedures will fall as this trend beds down, and that if this continues, we should see less chemical and physical transitioning. That would be a prediction.
Kaufman's X post about his new report has been viewed by more than 17 million people, with pushback from liberals.
People on the left who say, well, this is happening because of Trump and what's been happening on legislation around trans.
And conservatives.
People who are worried that if we think things are improving, then the political will is going to decline to reform, for example, gender ideology in schools, or whether schools have to inform parents of when kids transition and all of this sort of thing.
Nevertheless, Kaufman stands by his analysis. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Coming back with an encouraging word for your Thursday. You're watching CBN NewsWatch. Stay with us. Time now for your Thursday Thankful, and today I want to leave you with this prayer of gratitude. God, thank you for peace in the middle of pain. Your word reminds us all you are near the brokenhearted, and your presence is peace. Your presence is joy. Your presence is love. And in peace, joy, and love, I have every victory. With that word, make today a day filled with gratitude and thanksgiving. It is the very heart of a thankful Thursday. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. You can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News channel. You can find them there at any time, as well as online at cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can email us, newswatch@cbn.com. You can also reach out and touch us on all social media platforms. We'll see you tomorrow.